The United Nations in the year 1981 adopted the 21st of September each year to mark the International Day of Peace. And this year, it was themed Cultivating a Culture of Peace. In Nigeria, the celebration was marked with voices raised in support of a system that works for all, irrespective of differences, with former President Goodluck Jonathan insisting on country first. What is Nigeria's policy direction around peace? Is it working for everyone? We'll find that out and more in this episode of The Policy with Leah. And it's nice to have you join me. My name is Leah Babatunde, of course, and we'll get the program started in a bit. We'll begin with major developments in the country from the Trends Table.
Nigeria's President Bola Tinubu this week urged the UN Security Council to give Nigeria and other African countries permanent seats at the council. He said this will strengthen its relevance and credibility. President Tinubu, who is the chairman of the Authority of Heads of States and Government of the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, made this position known while addressing world leaders at the general debate of the 79th session of the United Nations General Assembly, UNGA, at the UN headquarters in New York, United States. Former President Goodluck Jonathan has called for quality leadership underpinned by credible and transparent elections and strict observance of the rule of law as solution for peace. He made the call in Abuja at the National Institute of Peace and Conflict Resolution, where he was awarded as Fellow Peace Institute, the second person after former President Yakubu Gowon.
Now, because we have not developed that culture of peace, they will use our military as if they are police officers. The military is not police. So, as a country, if we don't change, we politicians don't change our political behavior and embrace that culture that must be embedded in us, that it will look as if it's a part of our genetic makeup, one day this country will be engulfed or go into a conflagration that nobody can control. So we, the politicians, must know that what we do wrongly is wrong. And when we politicians justify evil things and say it is politics, somebody who does something that is evil to is politics. It's not politics, you're a criminal.
The Central Bank of Nigeria, CBN, this week raised its monetary policy rate, MPR, by 50 basis points in a move that aims to further curb inflationary pressures, bringing the benchmark interest rate to 27.25%. MPC also raised the cash reserve ratio, CRR, for commercial banks by 500 basis points to 50%, up from 45%. Merchant banks were raised by 200 basis points to 16%.
Members observed a strong correlation between FAC releases and liquidity levels in the banking system, as well as its impact on the exchange rate. The committee, therefore, agreed to increase monitoring of future releases with a view to addressing its effect on price developments.
Ministries, departments, and agencies, MDAs, have been charged to ensure that the 2025 budget aligns with their mandates as authorities seek to deliver an acceptable budget. The charge was given by Tanimu Yakubu, Director General of the Budget Office of the Federation, at a training session on preparing the 2025 budget using the Government Integrated Financial Management Information System, Budget Preparation Subsystem, GIFMIS PBS, for all ministries, departments, and agencies in Abuja.
Together, we can ensure that our budget proposals for 2025 are not only robust and focused, but also aligned with our national priorities. This is our moment to demonstrate to the Nigerian people our steadfast commitment to delivering a budget that genuinely meets their needs while upholding strict fiscal discipline.
The Nigeria Deposit Insurance Corporation (NDIC) says it has paid 84.98% of the depositors of the defunct Heritage Bank their insured sums using their bank verification numbers (BVN). Managing Director of the corporation, Bello Hassan, who made the disclosure at the 2024 NDIC Business Editors and Finance Correspondents Association of Nigeria workshop in Lagos, said the prompt payment serves as a buffer for the negative impact of the bank failure, especially during the current challenging economic times. The workshop is themed Strengthening Nigeria's Financial Safety Net, the Role of Deposit Insurance.
Now here's that conversation on Nigeria's policy around peace. Dr. Joseph Ochogwu is the Director General of the Institute for Peace and Conflict Resolution, IPCR, in Abuja, Nigeria's capital. And he's got over 20 years' experience in multidisciplinary peace, conflict, and social integration. He also has sector-specific skills in policy formulation, diagnostic, and prognostic analytic research explicitly related to peace building, conflict transformation and resolution, parliamentary reform, leadership and organizational development, policy analysis, and social development. You seem to have so many things. How do you do that?
No, absolutely. I think it has to do with my background. I'm in the public service, but in the research component of the public service, which gives me the latitude, to do development consultancies on governance matter and issues around peace and security, as well as conflict resolution. So it's a multidisciplinary orientation that one has built over the years, which is at times a bit unique, in the public service. And I interact with the diplomatic corps, both the Nigerian creme de la creme of Nigerian diplomacy, as well as the foreign diplomats in Nigeria, as well as I work with international non-governmental organizations, national governmental, non-governmental organizations, and community-based organizations. That is to say, grassroots level, as well as within the government system. And amazingly, I work with the tri-service. So it's a very creative skills, actually, that one has taken time to build over the years, So I think the research component also provides a bit of advantage.
Okay, we're going to just birth on that position, and perhaps I just shoot straight now to ask, why do we have to set a particular day as Peace Day globally? And I'm taking an offshoot from the UN Secretary General, who says the peace seems to be running away, if I will paraphrase that.
Absolutely.
Are we making any gains at all?
If you look at it carefully, I think it is in the wisdom of the United Nations system, as well as other international stakeholders, to set aside September 21st every year as International Day of Peace. The essence of it is actually to amplify the voice for peace, ensure the prioritization of peace. And the reason largely has to do with the fact that global politics, even national politics, are oftentimes dominated by those in the forceful sector, and that is the natural thing, actually, in terms of state building, and all that. So the focus is oftentimes on the use of force, to try to manage society and all that. But we know that over the years, also, the use of force have not actually provided solution, for humanity, even in international relations. If you look at 9/11, and the massive use of force, and you can see how it increased globally, the proliferation and liberalization of violence and violent extremism, across the world. Perhaps if other approaches were used, maybe it would have been much more better, and all that. So even at national level, international level, there is this the predominance, of the use of force. And as well, resources also go into that direction. So when you set aside a specific day like 21st of September every year, what that creates is that it provides an opportunity to further re-echo, and reinforce, the agenda for peace, in the world, both at the family level, at the community level, at the national level, and the global stage. Like the Secretary General rightly said, the world is actually teetering towards, if we are not careful, a nuclear war. And that is the truth. I said the same thing in China, and I said it in Kenya, and I think that other colleagues from other parts of the world agree with me sufficiently. And the reason is that in this era of multipolarism, where there are different powers, superpowers as well as medium powers, and all sorts of powers within the system, and they have nuclear assets. We pray that there is no provocation that will lead to that. The Ukrainian war is one particular war where we are calling on parties to quickly do cessation and then come to the table, and reach certain level of agreement and calls that. So if you look at the world geopolitically, and you look at the geopolitical tensions, around the world, you begin to see the need, to prioritize peace, to prioritize issues around dialogue, stakeholders consultation, negotiation, and peace building activities that can make people, that can increase the confidence and trust of parties of nation states and individuals, in respective areas of the world. You and I know that as we speak now, Sudan is almost off, with millions of people displaced. You see the same violent extremism in the Sahelian region. And we really have to be careful as humanity on what we project. And that is why we're calling for the culture of peace, cultivating a culture of peace. Even violent actors, they want peace for their families. That's why you can see that some countries are looted, depraved, and then resources are taken, and the country goes into war, and their families, too, are scattered. Or they position their family somewhere they think it's a peace heaven. The point is that everywhere we are as human beings, we need to build peace. In the family level, first and foremost, we need to inculcate the ideals and ideas, of peacemaking, peaceful coexistence, peaceful neighborhoods, and all that, between man and wife, between man, wife, and children, between man, wife, children, and their neighbors, between man, wife, children, and their places of worship, as well as in the marketplace, in their workplace, as well as in the community where they live. Once we are able to get that, that will be transcending now, and then you'll be having a multiplier effect, across the world. So you can imagine, for example, Boko Haram elements, if they're exposed to the rudiments of peaceful coexistence and peaceful living, it's going to be difficult for them, to begin to go into the area of violence or killing people. There are, of course, other negative triggers and multipliers of why violence go the way they go.
Yeah, I was going to actually ask you, for us in Nigeria, what are those causative factors?
Some will tell you poverty, but I know that there are people living in poverty with decency, so which means that poverty itself is not an ultimate primer for someone to become violent. There are those who say it's unemployment, which is associated with poverty. But I think the worst component from my studies and my experience, people who become violent actors are people who go through a process of socialization in the art of violence. Not the military, not the police, because those ones are socialized for the use of violence, for the protection of all of us. But for these other elements, there are causes. One major thing is radicalization, in terms of what is also called negative socialization. There is a bit of deviancy, in it, because even those, for example, who are agitating for separation and all that, the guys perpetuating the violence act are involved in criminal activities and drug addiction. No human being, and I've said this time without number, there is no human being that can kill anybody without an incentive in terms of negative incentives, except when the person is threatened to the point of the person's life is being threatened and the person needed to react. And the person reacts for self-survival. And once, for example, somebody tells you that he's more superior than you, he's questioning your humanity and is gradually driving you into certain things. And that is why peace building is very important. We have all sorts of stereotypes across the country, stereotypes between Igbos and Hausa, Igbo, Yoruba, different tribes with the kind of stereotypes, they identify other groups with and all that. Some stereotypes can be peaceful at some certain point, but those stereotypes, there are boundaries you can't cross. And the younger generations don't even know these stereotypes, and they are not, they don't see these stereotypes as a joke. I'm an Idoma man, so if you call me an Akboto, for example, I will like, what the heck are you saying? You get the point. But older generations might take it, but younger generations might not take it. And that is why we're talking about de-stereotyping, the kind of stereotypes we have before. The stereotypes that people were joking with in the 60s cannot be the same thing with the 70s. So also in the 80s, it cannot be the same thing. And in the 90s, and in these Gen Z generations, these younger generations of people, anywhere you find human beings existing, there must be conflict because you don't expect everybody to be the same. So that itself presents a lot of challenge on how we need to build our society. State building, nation building, as well as peace building. There are three different concepts, but they're interrelated on how we go about it. So we need the technical nuances, on how we calibrate. If you look at Mr. President's 8 priority agenda, which has to do with issues around food security, job creation, access to capital, inclusion, and a host of other type, 8 of them. The one that resounds to me is inclusion. Now, when I'm talking about inclusion always, it's inclusion in terms of political inclusion, social inclusion, economic inclusion. So you see, the inclusion component is the peace component that is the foundation of every other thing that you do. How we give our people the sense of belonging to know that this nation belongs to each and every one of us and we need to risk our life in the defense of this country is very important. My responsibility is to ensure that there is a success that is achieved by the government that is in power, because it is the success of that government that is in power that is my success and the success of everyone in the society. So we cannot afford to do the kind of what I call negative opposition politics, this pull him down syndrome. Once a person contests election, wins elections, and is in power, the onus is on all of society to provide all of society approach to ensure that, one, we overcome some of the negative challenges that we contend. If we don't, we're going to weaken the capacity of our institutions to perform certain things. And at the end of the day, we're going to have ourselves to blame. That is why we need to support both the military in their respective frontline areas where they are operating. In the Institute, we are doing civil-military relations. We have courses around it where we take through the zones. And with our partners, Frederick Ebert Stephen, which we've been doing the last 5 years, and we have some cohorts of people to train at the community level to carry on, including issues around women, peace, and security. It's important that I mention one of the flagship work that we're doing currently. We're going to be doing the dissemination, and we hope to invite you. It's what we call formalization of the scavenger economy, for sustainable development.
Why scavengers?
The scavengers are the most marginalized, neglected, stereotyped, stigmatized, Nobody really cares. But they are there, serving us as well as posing a security threat. So why don't we try to bring them on board? Identify with them, trace them, give them a sense of inclusion. Majority of them don't have the national identity.
Correct. The
Yes, so you can't even trace them. So if it's for security challenges, if they pierce a knife to somebody and then they disappear, you can't trace them. Perhaps thanks to police who is working against or to track some of these things. You see our national investment in terms of our national infrastructure. And you can see the vulnerability, of these critical national assets. Even in spite of creating the civil defense, a wing of it, to look at the protection of critical assets. Our assets are still being stolen, still being depleted. So we zeroed in our research to try to see how we can mitigate some of those incidences and provide the right policy advisory, for our government, Nigerian government, to look at. Note that I am accountable to the Honorable Minister of Foreign Affairs, where we also help in doing some of these things. The essence of that scavenger actually is to see how they can be included. That is the inclusion component now, the 8th priority area of Mr. President. And I'm happy that a lot of stakeholders are beginning to understand that, wait a minute, the Institute for Peace and Conflict Resolution, perhaps it's not the way we think around it, and they are well positioned to deliver certain things.
There used to be this conception that you don't have any business with the locals, you only have business with the international partners, but we're beginning to see that it is absolutely not that way.
No, it's not that way.
So, are you having any kinds of conversations with the subnationals? I'm asking these questions now because it will seem like most of these problems are at the local level.
I just told you about the scavengers.
Yes.
The scavenger research took me to the largest dump site in Africa, called the Oloshon dump site in Ojota. You need to go there. That is this scavengers picking waste, I was there on myself, in the last 15 years, the Institute has been propagating for subnational governments, to establish their own peace agency or peace commission. We are glad that some are already doing it, Benue State, Kaduna State, Ebonyi State just picked up, Anambra State will just pick up, Plateau State has been there. The local government election is coming. You and I know that just not election is a very crucial and critical election. In 2008, it erupted, and caused a lot of conflagrations, internet warfare, community warfare, that created a lot of distrust among the populations in Jos. And we can see how that has escalated into different parts of Plateau. But thank God, for the peace that is returning. But the local government election portends a very great danger. A very great danger because there are people who feel a bit marginalized, who feel they are more in number and all that. So there is a lot of political arrangement that needs to be worked, to ensure that peace does not elude the people of that place. And like you rightly said, our work, we need to work more at the community level. We have resources that are a bit constraining, but there is a work we are doing on national early warning, early response component. Amazingly, it's funded by USAID, US government, through Mercy Corps, which is an INGO, and then ONEP, which is a West African Network of People, so they provide us some of the tools and equipments, that we need. And from that program, we've created what we call the community early warning responders. That community early warning responder is working at the grassroots level. And then the difference we're making is that we're integrating security actors at the local level. We bring them together, capacitate them, on how to react and how to relate with themselves to prevent crisis. But should crisis come and it's more than them, how to escalate it. We'll be doing that across 9 states. We'll be doing the launch, this is September, in October, the national launch of the early warning responders group. We also have what we call the community volunteers who activate incident reports in our situation room, which will be launched to by the time we are doing the responders thing. And the essence of that is for us to speed up our response time to issues around conflict. But again, having said that, I think that it is critical to be very, very frank and to say certain things. And one of the critical things I want to say is the issues around the local government. The local government is the 3rd tier of the government as provided by the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. We have the federal government. I call it an abstraction because it's working largely on the exclusive list. We have the state government that is working on the concurrent list alongside with the federal government. We have the local government, which is working on issues around the residual list, which has to do with basic education, basic health, grading of roads, and access to market management and waste management and other things and all that. My dear, those components of government are almost near, they are not in existence. Where they are in existence, they are very weak and lack capacity to deliver the dividends of governance that they need to deliver. And the crisis point is that the local government is the front line, for conflict prevention, management, and resolution of the government. So where you have that lacking, then there is a big crisis. And that is why you find this cycle, this back and forth, in the last 20-something years plus. Because you go to some of the capitals, some of the local government headquarters, they are overgrown with grasses. So if there is a crisis in those local communities, who intervenes? If we don't reactivate the local government system, no matter the mileage the national government does or the state government does, it will just go down the drain. Because people can't be left alone to govern themselves. So what we have in those respective local communities across the 774 local government is a weak local government. Perhaps we can isolate states like Lagos State, where they created the local government development areas, alongside the existing ones in the constitutions and all that. We need to agree on certain minimum. It doesn't matter the political party, where you come from or whatever. There are certain things that an elite class of any nation state must agree on. So there is quite a lot that requires all of society collaborations and cooperation to make it work.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I must sincerely thank you, Dr. Ochogwu, for making time for this conversation.
Thank you so very much.
My name is Aldumi Ikori.
Keep watching The Policy with Leah.
It aims to provide policymakers an opportunity to explain their policies in a way that members of the public affected by those policies can understand and engage with those policies.
Keep watching The Policy with Leah.
We move on to our education segment, Simplified, and from there we head to the markets, where the price of beans last month almost tripled from the previous month. The most we can take on this episode of the program. Don't forget, you can log on to our sister website, www.marketnigertv.com. We have all the market details there for you. Until we come your way again, same time next week, don't forget to follow us on YouTube at Saban Media Services. Subscribe and leave your comments, questions, and suggestions to help us serve you better. My name is Leah Katungbaba today, and I say happy weekend and God bless you.